Hey, Randy Joe here, and this is not the usual video. This is not a reaction video. This is not a review. Instead, this is me looking back at the last 100 reviews I've done so far on this channel. Because with the 1001 albums to listen to Before You Die series, struggling there, I have gotten about 100 albums into this thing, picked entirely at random from Google. And I am now deciding to look back at those previous 100 ones and either re-rank, retool some of my opinions of them, and just address certain ones in this video, and just overall, update, I guess, the ranking. Because when I did start this channel, the first 6 or so reviews that I did, I didn't have the certain ranking system that I do now with the soft ranking and the hard ranking sort of system. The soft ranking, of course, being the average, whereas the hard ranking is my adjusted rating overall. And so I guess that is where we are going to start. I do have a list of changes that I'm going to make. Some of these changes are going to be shocking and possibly anger some people, but some of these changes will be positive and possibly make some people happy. So I apologize in advance if I disappoint in the end of this video, but also just, bear with me here. I am trying to be as fair as possible. But first things first, let's address this Google spreadsheet I got here. Ba-bam, it's gonna go up on the screen, and this is this is the complete ranking that I have currently of every single album I reviewed. This is 100 albums. As you can see, it goes all the way down. Boom, 100. I do put this down here simply because, Google Docs doesn't have the best way to make headings. I put it up here. Now everything's knocked down one. As you can see, the highest ranking album is Ambient 1 Music for Airports by Brian Eno. And that has a true 10, and for some reason gets put at second despite the fact that it would be in first. It's just because Google Docs has a terrible way of doing headings. But, just take one off, and that's the ranking so far. But first things first, you got album title, the artist in column B. Column C, we've got the year, then the soft rating, then the hard rating. Column F is letter grade, whether or not it's essential or not essential. The genre is under G, kind of fitting, didn't even do that on purpose. Label under H, producers under I, J is art direction, country, K, runtime, L, gender. I do think that's important to add here. If they are a male, I put M. If they're a female, I put F. If they are another genre or another gender, that they identify as, I will tag that as such. And then, of course, we have person of color, which I also think is important because once I am done going through this entire book, I do want to look back and see how much of the book is dominated by, certain genders and certain races. Specifically, how much of this is going to be just straight white men, which I'm guessing is going to be majority. But I want to scroll down to the bottom and just address some of the negatives, the worst albums so far in this series. The worst one is Husker Du, I'm not sure how to pronounce it still, Warehouse Songs and Stories, which when I reviewed it, I gave a 4.1 soft rating to and a hard rating of 3 out of 10 and a not essential. I do not like this album still. This is still my least favorite so far. It is a struggle to get through. It is like an hour and 10 minutes long. It is far too long, too bloated, and I feel, fine with that being the worst album so far. And of course, we've got 10 by Pearl Jam. I know that's going to get a lot of hate still. I'm not changing that ranking. I do think it's essential because it was super influential and did change the early 2000s of rock, especially in the late 90s rock. I just personally don't think that change was for the better. But the change is still there. The impact is still there. I'm going to keep it essential, even though I still think it's only a 4 out of 10 album. Sue me. And then, we got stuff like The Message from Grandmaster Flash, which I reviewed pretty early on in this channel. And even though I think most of this album is just hot garbage, as there are 3 tracks here where they just reintroduce themselves over and over again, and there's also 2 soul tracks that just aren't very good at all. They just feel like cheap imitations of Stevie Wonder and the such. There is the title track, The Message, which is perfect in my opinion, and I never skip that one. That's fantastic. but that's the only worthwhile track here, so that'll stay not essential. But as you can see here, this is the list so far. And then if we scroll up to the top, these are the, I'm going to move this down because you guys know what's what here, I believe. So I'll show off the top 30. But the top 5, as of right now, is The Wall, Enter the Wu-Tang Clan, The Idiot, Hot Buttered Soul, and Ambient 1 in that order. Ambient 1 Music for Airports, Hot Buttered Soul, The Idiot, and Enter the Wu-Tang Clan. Those are all true 10s, meaning every track is perfect in my opinion, and these are perfect albums in their entirety, through and through, without a single weak track. And I still stand by all of these. None of these are going to change. However, I cannot say the same for the rest of these, because some of them are going to change. Not all of them, just the ones I have written. Now, I've wasted way too much time already talking, so let's just get into the nitty and gritty here. First things first, I need to assign some soft ratings to a few albums here because, again, like I said, the first, the first 6 albums that I reviewed on this channel, I did not do the soft rating system that I do now, and so I want to address that. Heaven or Las Vegas, 8.7 soft rating. I just want to say that anything I am changing today, anything I am switching up in this sheets, Google Sheets here, I have re-listened to and have since either changed my mind based on these re-listenings. This is not just a spur of the moment, I feel like this, I feel like that. I am, thinking about the album as I currently feel about it, as I have re-listened to them, because I've re-listened to, I would say, a good 50% at least of these many times over, and some of these have grown a lot on me, some of these have gone down, and that's why I'm doing this. So next we have Bridge Over Troubled Water, which is right here, and that gets a let's see, 8.7 as well, which I stand by, and that bumps this above a decent amount of these, bumps it up right underneath Heaven or Las Vegas, where it should be. Paul Simon, I also did not give a rating to at the time. 10, that's getting an 8 out of 10 with a 9 hard rating, meaning that drops down quite a bit down here. Would I put it above A Love Supreme or Deep Purple and Rock? Well, I'll put it above Deep Purple and Rock because I have some comments about A Love Supreme, which I will be saving for later. Led Zeppelin 3, right here, it's an 8 out of 10, and that'll stay right there. It's above an 8, yeah, that'll stay there. Blues Breakers, reviewed that one. I think that was like my second video or so, or maybe a third, something like that. But I liked it a lot, and I still like it a lot. I still think it's fantastic. That gets an 8.2 out of 10 for a soft rating, and an 8.5 hard rating, which drops it below Close to You by Carpenters. I just want to say, if it's 0.1 off, that doesn't necessarily mean I like the other one more. It's just a 0.1 difference. It's just, that's a matter of how I'm feeling that day. I don't want anyone being like, oh, you gave this album an 8.6 out of 10, and personally, this album below it, 8.5 you gave, I think is better. It's a 0.1 difference. It doesn't mean anything. Don't think that much of it. Next, we got Van Halen, which should be down here because I am not a huge Van Halen fan. And I gave that one a 6 out of 10, meaning that will also stay where it is given the fact that it has a 6.5. So that's it for the updating the albums from the beginning of the channel that never got the soft rating. Now let's get to the hard news. Let's start with what I'm changing, just some things that aren't a big deal, which first and foremost, I want to address, I'm going to drop this down. Live at the Regal by the great B.B. King is right here in 34th place, which I'm fine with, but I gave it an L at the time. An L, as negative as that sounds, actually meant landmark album, and if I felt something was a landmark album and would be noted in music history as extremely important, I'd give it the L, but I've only done it for this one album, and I just don't really think this rating idea, the L for landmark, is worth it. I'm going to stick to not essentials and essentials only, meaning this L is changing to an E for essential. It is a great album. It is essential. It is worthy of a listen. If you want to discover a great live album, definitely give that one a listen. There's no point for giving an L for Landmark. That was just, at the time, me trying to do something different that I've since changed my mind about. Next, I want to change Scott 2, an album that I thoroughly enjoy. It was my first exposure to Scott Walker. But I do think Scott 4 is better overall. It is a much better record. And I'm changing that from an essential to a not essential. Simply because I'm trying to stick with, keeping things limited for an artist's catalog. And Scott 2 isn't that different from Scott 4 artistically speaking. It's just a weaker sort of, set of songs in my opinion. So I'm going to give that a not essential because I think Scott 4 is essential. Scott 2, not essential. Just in the same way that I gave Paul Simon's self-titled a not essential and Bridge Over Troubled Water an essential. If Paul Simon has a better album than another one, I don't see the weaker one having the essential rating, essentially. Graceland will get an essential most likely when I eventually review that. Next we got Queen 2. That is also getting a not essential. I have listened to the entire Queen discography, and I do not think Queen 2 is among their best. I probably wouldn't even put it in the top, 3 or top 4 or whatever. So I don't see a reason that being essential. I've changed my mind on that one, because opinions change, and when you're really trying to narrow down the essential records, there's so little time to listen to music as is, especially with so much music coming out. Why waste your time with certain ones when you can go right to Queen's best, which would probably be A Night at the Opera. Do I deliver the bad news or the good news first? Personally, there's more bad than good. So, I hate to say it, but I'm going to deliver the bad news first. We'll start with the easier ones, and we'll work our way up to what's going to be a heavy opinion for me to drop and for something me to say that I just feel like a lot of people are going to be upset about, even people subscribe to this channel, and I apologize in advance for how this is going to go. First bit of negative news. Beyonce, her self-titled 2013 album, I'm going to change to a hard rating of 7. I've tried listening to this thing again and again, and I realized that as time goes on, I actually like it less. And I actually think, she has better records, making this a not essential. I think she has better records than this one. There are some great songs on here, but for the most part, Beyonce's self-titled, I do think is slightly overrated and not essential. And that's how I feel about that. Next, we've got Deep Purple in Rock. Deep Purple in Rock, which is right here at number 37. Although I gotta move Beyonce. It's a high 7. It's a very high 7. Deep Purple in Rock. The hard rating for that gets an 8 out of 10. 8 out of 10 record, Deep Purple in Rock. And that's not changing from a not essential. That's staying essential. Deep Purple, still an essential record in my opinion. Let's drop that down here. And that puts it with Rattlesnakes by Lloyd Cole and the Commotions, although I will say that I like Rattlesnakes more. Dear Science. It's at number 27, and that's also going to switch to an 8 out of 10. So, boom, Dear Science, 8 out of 10. I'm not going to change the soft ratings of these right now, but they wouldn't vary that much. I just think overall, Dear Science by TV on the Radio is not as good as I initially felt. I'm going to move that down. Definitely better than Your Arsenal by Morrissey, but even that one, that one's one I've considered changing as well. But for now, it's going to remain where it is. Casanova. Oh, this is a hard one. When I initially started the channel, I loved Casanova when I first heard it. I thought it was brilliant. I still think it's a great record, especially if you view the concept album here as a guy who uses sex and his sexual prowess as a way to cover up the fact that he's struggling with gender dysphoria. A man who's clearly struggling with the idea of the fact that he's actually a woman trapped in a man's body was an interesting concept to me. I don't know if that's the album's intent still, And I do think this is overall still a great concept album. I just think a lot of the tracks, for me, aren't as initially interesting as they were at the time. Call it recency bias at the time, but I gave it a 10. And I still like it a lot, but I don't like it that much. I'm going to change that one to an 8.5. I still think it's fantastic, and I still think it's essential. It's a great Baroque pop record. Closest thing to modern Scott Walker that I think we've had in the 90s, at least. I like it a lot, but I'm going to drop that down here. Bada boom, bada bing. And then we've got another one where it was kind of a similar idea with Casanova, where, again, recency bias, or maybe I was just so blown away because I didn't like their initial debut record as much as a lot of people did, and I loved this record so much. And I'm talking about Portishead's Third, which I gave a 10 out of 10 to, which I was giving 10s out too easily back then. I would say I'm giving that a 9 out of 10. So a slight step down. It's still a great record, which drops it from 7th place above Off the Wall by Michael Jackson. At 17th is where Third ends up. Now here is quite possibly the biggest move yet. I think people are going to be pretty upset by this one, which is fair. But I tried listening to this album many times. Well, not tried. I have listened to this album many times, and I still love this album. I think it's fantastic, and I think overall it is a great concept album, and it is highly regarded as one of the best concept albums of all time by one of the best bands of all time. But I also think it is quite overrated and quite bloated, especially in the second half, which I said in my initial review. And I also think the vocals are quite whiny and screeching and annoying to the point where it does affect the quality of the music, in my opinion. I'm talking about The Wall by Pink Floyd. I am sorry to all Pink Floyd fans, but The Wall is not a 10 out of 10 record in my opinion anymore. I thought it was at the time, but I think here's the thing, and I'm going to admit it. When I first started this channel, I did not want to let people down. I did not want to voice my opinion as harshly as I do now, because I didn't want people being offended when I attack a popular record. But I do think The Wall is overrated. I think the second half is far too messy, especially with the direction it goes in with the whole Nazi theme. And I think the vocals on this album, like I said earlier, are just far too whiny and overall not that polished. I'm not a big fan of The Wall as much as I used to be. Still a great record, still essential, an essential Pink Floyd for sure, and a great concept overall. But the album is really carried by its concept, and the story here really does carry the album more than the music tends to, because some of the music here is skippable, is not that interesting. And I think the concept is really what makes this for most people, which, you know, if that's all that's carrying an album, that's not necessarily a good thing. So that's dropping down, I'm sorry, quite low, down to here. It's in 36th place. It went from 4th to 36. Sue me, but that's how I feel. That does it for the negatives. That does it for the bad news. Let's get on to the good news. Let's end this video on a sweet note and talk about the things that I think have actually improved over time with me, and I actually like more now, and I actually think are better albums than when I initially heard them. And these are all going up quite high. First and foremost, I want to talk about A Love Supreme by John Coltrane. I have had a lot of people in my comments on A Love Supreme say that I didn't get this album, which is what I said when I initially heard it. I said I don't think I get it yet. And here we are, less than a year later, probably like, 8-9 months after I released that video, and I get it. I love that album. I think it's one of my favorite jazz albums. I have listened to it many times since my initial review, trying to learn and understand the album, and now I do think on a spiritual level and on a technical level, this is one of my favorite jazz albums ever. quite possibly my personal favorite, actually, if I'm being honest. It's just, at the time, it didn't click with me that way. And that's just how some albums are. And with the way I do my videos, with the reaction-based videos I do now, sometimes that's going to happen. You know, I'm not going to click with it right away, and that's fine. As long as I address it later, maybe, or, you know, just, you know, admit that it's just not for me, I think that's okay. And A Love Supreme, though, has greatly changed. So if we scroll down to A Love Supreme, which is at 32 right now, I'm going to change the soft rating. So we're going to change this to a 9.5, because the more I think about it, which is to say that two of the tracks here, I think are perfect. The first and last track, whereas the second and third track on this album are not as good as the first and last, but they're still fantastic. They're still brilliant. They're still amazing. And then the hard rating, I'm going to give it a 10. I think it is essentially a perfect record. And if somebody told me this was the best Jazz album ever, in their opinion, I wouldn't disagree. It is fantastic. John Coltrane, A Love Supreme, is a brilliant album. So that brings it quite high up here, which brings it to the 8th place, okay? 8th overall, A Love Supreme, John Coltrane, has now cracked my top 10. And then we have Behavior by Pet Shop Boys, which I want to address, which I initially gave an 8.4 soft rating to and a 9 for the hard rating. I'm just going to change the hard rating to a 10. Call me crazy, but I have listened to this album so much in the past 2 or 3 months, and I think it is pretty much perfect. I think this thing is just brilliant, and the soft rating of it also is going to change to a 9.2. But last but not least, we have Since I Left You, switching from a soft rating of 9.1 to 9.5, changing the hard rating to a 10. The reason for this is because I've been listening to this thing, again, just as much as I've been listening to a lot of the other albums I've addressed here, where this one has blown my mind perhaps the most out of all the ones I've revisited, simply because Plunderphonics and the art of sampling is something that I personally have a strong enjoyment in recently. I mean, I actually bought a sampler myself to try doing it, and this album is immaculate from start to finish. It does not waste a single sample. There's like 3,000 samples or something like that on this record, I heard. And honestly, it is so impressive how they made this just beautiful 1 hour album that is just chock full of samples and sounds so incredibly well produced and so crisp. There's not a single bad track on Since I Left You. And that gets a 10 out of 10 hard rating with a 9.5 soft rating, which will go right. I'll put it above A Love Supreme just because I have a more personal connection with Since I Left You than I do A Love Supreme. You know, Plunderphonics I think is a fantastic underrated genre, and they nail it here. It is quite possibly the perfect essential Plunderphonics album. So that gets adjusted. It comes in 8th place overall. And that is it for my changing of the ratings. One last time, my top 10, as I record this, my top 10 currently out of 100 albums that I've reviewed so far are 10th, A Seat at the Table by Solange, came out in 2016. A Love Supreme, John Coltrane, 1965. Since I Left You by The Avalanches, came out in 2000. Out of Step by Minor Threat, great hardcore punk album, 1983, the only 80s album to crack my top 10. Scott 4 by Scott Walker, the best Scott Walker album in my opinion, came out in 1969. Black Saint and the Sinner Lady by Charles Mingus, 1963. An overall, incredible jazz album, on par with A Love Supreme in my opinion. It's really just a matter of what day I'm feeling, what I'm feeling that day. If I want something more spiritual, I'll go with A Love Supreme. If I want something more, I guess, grand or epic, I might go Black Saint. 4th place, 10 out of 10 album, Enter the Wu-Tang Clan, 36 Chambers, 1993 record. 3rd place, The Idiot by Iggy Pop. I love it. I think it's fantastic. I think there is no bad track here. It's a great sense of atmosphere. It's brilliant. Hot Buttered Soul, 1969 by Isaac Hayes. This is a fantastic album. Again, 4 tracks long, not a second of it wasted. I can understand some people saying the 4th track is a bit long-winded, but personally, I think that is all about setup and the payoff. And then, of course, number 1, as funny as it sounds, is an ambient album. Ambient 1, Brian Eno. 4 tracks, not a second wasted. This thing eases my anxiety instantly. I don't know what it is, but Brian Eno just put all his power into this album. So that is my top 10. But yeah, that is pretty much the ranking. It is what it is. I'm going to probably link this in the description below this video if people want to take a look at it and just see where certain albums ended up. As always, thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking my videos. Thank you for watching my content. And hit subscribe. I'm going to be continuing this series. I know I've been off for a bit, but I'm back. And yeah, I will plan on continuing the series as I have been before. Hopefully, more consistently. But, life gets in the way. Yeah, thanks for watching. As always, my name is Randy Joe, and I'm signing off.